All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Arute from T4 Survival and Alpha Krav Maga. I'm here along with Scott Allard, Michael Kahn, and Dr. Kenneth Marcus. We're going to be discussing de-escalation in tonight's segment. I'm sure you guys are going to have questions. And as some of you already been on with webinars with us in our live streams, that's usually front-facing, meaning you could see our faces, but we can't see you. And the only way for you to communicate with us is through a chat box. We decided to try the Zoom meeting format tonight so that we can have a little bit more of an open forum type of dialogue. So after each segment of what we're discussing, we're going to allow you to raise your hand. And then if you'd like to ask a question, we can ask you to unmute your microphone, and you can ask any of us questions or all of us as a group. If you prefer not to be highlighted that way, you could message me directly in a private message, and I can answer the question that way without bringing any attention to the person asking the question. So look at that as an option as well. I ask you to please hold all questions if you can until after we're done with the segment. Maybe have a notepad and a pen next to you so that as we're going through certain things, if there's something that arises that you'd like to ask at the question at the end of the segment, you can take little notes, and that way you remember exactly what the question is as we get to the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mike and Scott. And a lot of you already know us already because you're on our website and our social media channels and have been following us for years. But I'd like to also introduce Dr. Marcus. So we'll first start off with Mike. Quick little background on him, quick background on Scott Allard, and then we're going to go over to our guest tonight, Dr. Kenneth Marcus. He'll give you a little background, and then we'll get right into this. So Mike, if you'd like to go first.
Sure, Mike Kahn. I've been an instructor at T4 Survival for 5-6 years now, Jamie.
Yeah, easy.
And in addition to that, I've been in law enforcement for 21 years. So this is a topic that we've been kind of working with for years. This is really called escalation. The goal is to get the person and with the minimal force necessary and talk to or use person, right? And more than somebody have that day. So
well, we've got a bad video feed. Hey, Mike, we got a bad video feed and audio feed. Your video is frozen and you sound like a robot. I apologize, but while you move your location, let's hop over to Scott and then Dr. Marcus, and then we'll come back over to you, Mike. I apologize. Scott, you want to go ahead, sir?
Yes, like Jamie said, I'm Scott Allard. I've been with Jamie since 2013. I'm an instructor with T4 Survival. I'm in the local law enforcement. I've been in for 17 years, about 20 years total in law enforcement. And this de-escalation training is very relevant to what us as law enforcement see and what you may be seeing at home. I just know that if you just watch the news, there's something going on where people seem like these situations are going out of control. And what people don't understand is if we take the time to stop and listen to what these people in crisis are going through, you can have a different scenario, a different ending. So I'm now a de-escalation instructor at my PD. And when I was on the road, this was like a new concept. So we weren't really doing it. Well, we thought we were doing it, but we didn't know to the point of how to do it. So just by talking to someone, we figured we were de-escalating, but we actually really weren't. So I think this is very relevant training, and I think tonight is going to be a great episode with the doctor on.
Excellent. Dr. Marcus, welcome. Thank you for coming on today. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. If you just take a second, introduce yourself, please.
Off my busy vacation, right? Yes. I've been seeing these guys for a long time. I trained with them a few years ago. Then my back gave out, but they thought I could be helpful because I have a lot of experience with mentally ill people who've committed violence and people who are substance abusing who have committed violence. And I can tell you some stories about that. But you'll see that in the moment of these situations, it becomes very hard to make a distinction, even though, as Jamie says, there are tells and there are various ways of, making a better guess than random. But but these are tough distinctions to make in the blink of an eye, and that's one of the problems with it. So the main key is to keep yourself safe and to avoid these situations. But we're going to be going in and talking to you about what happens if you can't.
Right. So today's seminar is going to cover a little bit of best practices for de-escalation. And I think a lot of people nowadays are very on edge with everything that's going on. And you might run into someone at the store, at the gas station, and they might have a little bit of an attitude, and that can quickly erupt into something that doesn't need to erupt. Think about your daily activities and things you go through on a weekly basis and weekends and personal things that are going on in your life. And sometimes you're distracted and some things might be on your mind. And just at that moment of time, you happen to run into somebody else that might be going through something as well, or had a bad day at work, had an argument with their significant other, and now things start to boil a little bit, right? So being able to take that deep breath in the moment of a situation where you're getting into maybe a verbal altercation, and it could start off just as a look, right? And that look turns into something verbal. And being able to take that deep breath in that moment and say, okay, let me analyze the situation. Do I really need to get heated? And it could be simple. And I make this example a lot of like road rage, right? You're pulling into a parking lot. You didn't realize maybe you cut somebody off because you were thinking about something else. You get into the parking space. Now somebody pulls up behind you and they're yelling and screaming at you that you cut them off on the road. And just as simple as saying, oh, I apologize. I didn't see you. I had a really bad day at work. I just had an argument with my significant other. I apologize. Might be simple enough for them to maybe say a few more words and go on their merry way, rather than jumping out of that vehicle and they're saying, you cut me off on the road. And you're like, no, I didn't. And now here you are in this verbal altercation and things are escalating when maybe that wasn't necessary. Would you agree with that, guys?
Yeah. Again, I think it's we are so apt to handle the situation right then and there. This guy cut me off. Let's handle it right now. Just what we've learned is take a step back. Just like you said, take a breath, see what the big picture is. Like you said, I cut you off. Listen, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. It's just we don't do that. That's the thing. And that's what we've learned to actually listen to what the other person is saying, or, so you guys can communicate better and then come to a better resolve than, taking baseball bats out and solving it in the street.
Right. And that brings the point too, that if this hasn't gotten into a physical altercation, the person isn't approaching you saying that they're going to beat the heck out of you. They're not pounding your vehicle. They're not reaching out to grab you. There is no physical contact or even any threat of physical contact at that point. That gives you that option to say, oh, wait a minute, and it's okay to say, back off a little bit, don't come any closer, but let's talk a little bit about what's going on here, and try to resolve the situation verbally. A lot of people just get so amped up that I've got to go physical now. And I think we need to take that pause if there's no need to. And what I'm trying to give you the example is, if someone was to try to rip you out of your car, they place their hands on you and they're getting physical immediately, it's a different story. We're having this conversation today about having that verbal communication and having that first interaction with someone where you don't feel physically threatened, maybe not yet, and you might have that opportunity to de-escalate this, right, guys?
Right.
The two things that get in the way of that, one is our own fear, and the other is our own ego. And boy, does that get in the way. I'm over 70, and it still rears its head at various points where you go, I should be older than this. I should be more mature than this. But somehow you get into this state where someone is either mad at you or is saying you did something you didn't do or whatever, and you don't want to lie down to them. And the fact is, that's why what Scott was saying about calm down, and what Jamie said, let's talk about it. I mean, if you can do that and not just fight fire with fire, that's half the battle, without question.
Yeah, absolutely. Doc, can you, and by the way, if anybody has any questions for any of us or as a group, please raise the hand and let us know, and we'll be sure to ask you to unmute, and you can ask questions that we're going through, rather than waiting toward the very, very end of today's seminar and maybe you forget what the actual question is. So anytime as we're talking, you're like, hey, I got a question on that, go ahead and hit that raise the hand button, and we'll call upon you. So Doc, can we dig in a little bit about the differences between the person that is having a mental episode at the time, or versus someone that might be on a substance, right? Either intoxicated, drugs, and so forth. What are some of the things to realize between those two? Can you dig into that a little bit for us, Doc?
Well, the most dangerous kind of person is the kind of person who has both, and that is someone who might have a paranoid illness, but who's also on amphetamines, where the paranoid illness makes the person think that all he has is enemies, and he's got to protect himself. And a lot of the times the protection is violent. You know, the best, for a paranoid person, the best defense is a good offense. And so you have to worry about that. And if you're also juiced up on amphetamines or cocaine or bath salts, PCP is a different story. I don't know, you guys probably know better than I do whether PCP is still a problem. I've heard it's receded somewhat. It's not.
A little bit. We don't get the calls like we used to on the PCP. So.
Right. No, I believe that. So we don't have to spend a lot of time of it. It's an interesting drug because it turns some people into almost superhuman dinosaurs. I mean, it's crazy, but they're really powerful and they're very hard to manage. But so we won't talk about that. But someone who is very paranoid, and I guess you would know, because what a paranoid person does is always try to put the blame somewhere else. A person who's paranoid feels frightened inside, but isn't aware of it because he puts all the fear, he deals with his own fear by making everyone afraid of him. And it could get to the point of attacking. And the thing is, I think Jamie set the stage for this. You be calm. The first thing with a paranoid person is to be calm. The irony is that you can't be too calm. And the reason, meaning you can't be reasonable or too deferential. We used to have this problem in inpatient units where we would take, the paranoid person would be out of control and angry and, thinking everybody was after him. And we would give him a sedative and that would calm him down. The trouble is a paranoid person needs to be afraid in order to be able to protect himself. So calming down scared these people more. And they became more violent because they thought they were losing control because they were feeling so calm. So it's to steer a middle ground between, you don't want to be belligerent, but you don't want to make the paranoid person feel like you're putting something over on him, that you're manipulating him, that you're doing something like that. So to be reasonable, but straightforward and forthright, and remembering that the person is a lot more afraid than you are, even if it looks like anger.
Curious, you mentioned a sedative to that person. Would that also include like marijuana? Would that also make that person become even more? They say marijuana is going to make everyone calm, right? No one commits a crime while they're smoking marijuana. However, the point you just brought up would contradict that.
Right. I've never seen that. I don't know. What it usually says that marijuana makes you mellow.
Right.
Right. Now, in a situation like this, I don't think, you know, this is all speculation, but I don't think marijuana would be one of the drugs that a paranoid person would use, or that we'd want to use it to calm them down. But could it be disinhibiting in the way that Jamie is saying? Yes. So you have to be careful no matter what. But the stimulants are much worse. Cocaine.
Got it. Absolutely.
And again, you know, this is one of those things that, I mean, I've had a number of experiences. When I was much younger, I was on call at a hospital, and this very small guy whom I knew very well, a patient, I was called to see him, and he got up, and I said, "Hi, Steve," and he punched me in the face so fast I didn't know what was happening. And the mistake I made was he was just waking up. And in someone who's mentally ill, when they come out of sleep, they're in a netherworld, and so you can appear like someone to be a monster, or attacking or something like that, and then they'll lash out, and it was so instantaneous. There was no way of knowing. So these are things that you pick up along the way, but it's a warning to keep your distance, to be reasonable, but not to be overly familiar, even if you know the person well.
Okay. You know, one other thought is is there a way to tell the difference between someone that might be under the influence compared to someone that is having is it appropriate to say mental episode?
Yeah, that certainly. There are a couple of ways that are not foolproof, but they're good.
Okay.
And we've left out alcohol, right?
Right.
I mean, alcohol is a major cause of violence because it's a disinhibiting agent. And that is, you know, it affects the part of the brain where you have judgment. And so you become more impulsive, and you're more like, that's what results in intimate partner violence, couples violence, that kind of thing, because you just don't control yourself as well.
Right.
And do all of you have some idea about what someone's like when they're drunk? I mean, that is usually not too difficult to tell, although some people who are intoxicated, and who are also what's called mean drunks, they look like they're fine. But overall, if you look someone who staggers a little bit, who's slurring his speech, smells of alcohol, those are the usual signs. But and in that case, when someone's intoxicated, what do you do?
Try to talk them down, right? Try to keep distance and space.
Yeah.
You've got to keep the space. But yeah, you could try it. Alcohol doesn't cause. You usually have to provoke someone who's intoxicated to commit violence, not necessarily with amphetamines. And you know, amphetamines give you very big pupils, and the person's jumpy. It's like they've swallowed a bunch of jumping beads, and they're agitated, and they're nervous, and they're moving, and their eyes dart. If you have any sense of that, it's much more difficult to have conversation, any kind of reasonable conversation, but you can back off. They're not predatory, unless they're criminals who use crack, which is a different problem then. But it's, again, the kinds of things that Jamie and Mike and Scott are going to teach you are basic how to keep your distance. You've always got to assume that someone could come at you in an unexpected way, and that your interventions, no matter how reasonable, are can only work to a point, and they're not absolute predictors.
Right.
So most of this involves keeping your head, which is very difficult when you're scared.
Right. Yeah. And that brings a whole ego. Now there's that
Right.
circle back in, right?
Right,
Oh, you can't
exactly.
talk to me that way. Who do you think you are? Right.
I think the key what we're seeing here is time and distance. We can maintain that buffer, that distance from that person, and let a little time pass. We can all calm down, and you can be better able to assess your opponent or the person you're squaring off with.
Right.
Right. But what you guys could add is, how are you ready to defend yourself even while you're engaging and trying to talk with them? Because you know, whether it's stance, whether it's, you know, putting a table between you and I mean, whatever measures that would slow someone down are just, can be crucial in these things.
Right.
The unexpected happens so often.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's okay to draw the line in the sand too. A lot of people forget about just the basic verbalization of, can you please back up a little bit? You're making me feel uncomfortable, right? That does two things. One, it kind of puts your line in the sand and lets them know that you are aware of the way that they're acting. It's making you feel uncomfortable. And you're also letting them know that you are showing that confidence to say, back up a little bit, give me a little bit of space, because not a lot of people say those words. Usually it comes in at the end, or it just ends up becoming something physical. But being able to draw that line, even if they're not consciously picking up on that, it's telling in the back of their mind subconsciously, hey, wait a minute, this person is calling me out a little bit, and they're trying to create some distance and space. So if their intention is that violence, they're realizing it's go time, or they're going to need to figure out another way to get rid of that space, right?
But that's where paying attention to what happens after you intervene in that way makes a difference. If that, because some people respond very well to that, but if someone is either intoxicated or is on an ego trip and feels like, if you're saying, you know, stand back, they feel like, well, if they give in,
right, and that's where it starts upping the ante.
Then it starts.
We lost Dr. Marcus for a second there. Let's see if he comes back in. Well, while we're waiting for his feed to come back in.
There he is.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. Doc, we lost you for a second there. We lost you for about the last 7 seconds. Can you just repeat that?
Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. I suppose that's better than it says that I'm unstable. But I'm trying to remember the specific. Was the specific in terms of watching how the person acts, and whatever it is, don't keep doing what you're doing if the situation is escalating as opposed to calming down.
Right.
So if you're being, I'm sorry, go on.
Doc, so you've got somebody with you that's being aggressive, or just there is an incident. Would you suggest that, say, pointing out to them, saying, listen, you're really upset, and when they reply to you, say, why? Kind of like put them in a frame of mind to think about what's going on.
Who the fuck are you to tell me I'm upset? I'm not upset. You're upset.
Well, why are you so upset, Doc?
We role play this stuff, by the way, everyone. We do seminars and counterterrorism seminars over the years where Doc has been brought into situations of suicidal people that were robbing stores, and he's talked them off the ledge. Mike was actually one of the bad guys for one of the role-playing incidents that was about to commit suicide. And Doc did a remarkable job of road blocking everything Mike was trying to do for about 7 minutes, and we just all wanted to have a big group hug.
He ruined my role play. He was making me wonder if I had things I needed to talk about at one point. I'm like, what's going on here, Doc?
Right, no, you know, but this is the trouble. I mean, I could do that, and I can't tell you how many times it hasn't worked.
There are no absolutes, like you said.
There's no absolutes, and
this is, I think that's the key for tonight, Doc.
What was that?
Doc, I think that's a big key for tonight. It takes two people that want to de-escalate or bring things down for it to work.
You know,
so you can give me all the techniques and strategies in the book, and if they don't want to cooperate, it's not going to happen.
Right.
You know, an example of that was we were taught a long time ago with suicidal people, if someone lets you talk to them, that means they're ambivalent. Because once someone's decided to kill themselves, they're not going to have a conversation with you. If they're not ambivalent, they're just going to do it.
Right.
So you have to assume that there's a part of them that wants to be talked out of it, and then it makes sense. But some people are just waiting for the bomb to go off or whatever, and you know, they may simulate talking to you or not, and you'll just have to sense it. It just you know, reading people is very ambiguous. It just, you're making guesses.
Right.
Which means, again, what the others are emphasizing, self-protection while you're engaging is very important.
Right. And I think there's nothing wrong with evaluating people when you're talking to them, whether they're going to explode or not, having cover, stand behind someone, talk to them. You know, you don't have to be out in the open talking to them with a guy with a gun in his hand. You know, get behind something and talk to them, or as long as you have that distance and time and cover, I think you should be good. And then you can relay the message and hopefully get communication between both of you.
Exactly. Right. And again, you don't go into a place where you're going to be isolated. I mean, you know, the environmental circumstances, you don't walk where you're vulnerable if you can avoid it. That's why police officers have it hard. They're supposed to go, and they have to walk right into the dangerous situation, and that makes it harder.
Right. Right. So walking, here's a good example. You're walking into a convenience store to pay for your gas, and you notice that someone is inside a little bit irate and yelling and screaming. Why continue that journey into that store? You're already outside. You're at a good distance. Pick up your phone, call 911, say, hey, I'm at such and such gas station. There's an irate person in there. Be the best witness that you could possibly be to relay information to authorities. Right, guys?
Right. And again, there's no reason to go in and try to solve it everything. Just like you said, go out, get a good description, and call the police. There's no sense of you trying to go in and trying to de-escalate this person, because who knows, you know? So who knows what he has on him or whatever his intentions are. So.
And the same goes if you're already inside the building. You're in a store. You're at the cashier at a store, at a grocery store, and someone's becoming irate. There's no reason why you can't just say, "I'm just going to go. I'm just going to leave. Leave your cart. Leave the stuff you were purchasing, and get out of there." Rather than putting yourself into that situation. Everybody wants to stand there and watch. Everybody wants to pull out their phone and videotape and get pictures and witness what might happen. Is this guy gonna do something violent? I don't want to miss it, right? But the reality is you probably do, right? And you don't want that violence to turn to you. So removing yourself completely out of the situation is a good rule of thumb, right?
So Doc, I know there's not one technique or tactic or something you could say that's going to put everybody or stop even 50% of the incidents, but has there been something that you've done over the years that seems to have maybe interrupted their chain of thought or been helpful in getting somebody to kind of change course that you've seen?
Well, let's see. What you guys have been emphasizing, one thing can be just being calm, and the other is to try to understand. See, if you're a police officer, you're in a better position to do that. If you're a civilian, to say, like, I see you're really angry, or something must be upsetting you or whatnot. It's like you don't have the standing to do that. I mean, people feel like, don't condescend to me. You may get a small group, but it's I've found in a lot of situations there, when there are other people around, if there's someone who knows the person, who the person trusts. And by the way, one thing I have found that is safe for me to do is to say something like, look, you're looking at me like you don't trust me. And you know what? If I were you, I wouldn't trust me either. As though to anticipate, to almost give the person permission not to trust you, which makes them trust you without their having to admit it. And also because it's real, they know, they're not trusting you. And what you can say is, look, I know you're not trusting me, but let's give it a chance. Tell me what's going on, because there may be a way out of this. Related to that is another thing you could say, which is, listen, I just want to say, I know you're feeling like you're about to explode and you're looking like you want to kill somebody. And I can tell you this, that a lot of people I've talked to after this has happened are very glad they didn't let themselves explode. That it calms down, and they weren't thinking of consequences at the time, but are very glad that nothing bad happened. And if you can keep that in your head and we can talk, we can get out of the situation without something awful happening. If you point to their current mental state, which is not their usual mental state, and that doesn't work. These guys taught me something very important a long time ago. And that is, if someone, because this is a different kind of violence, if someone like tries to take you hostage or tries to move you from one situation to another, that's not a time where you negotiate. You don't allow it to happen unless that wisdom has changed. Has that
No,
changed?
it hasn't. So
Okay.
it's don't get moved from your primary location. So
Right,
if you were to get outside of your vehicle and someone approaches you with a weapon or no weapon, says get back in the car, that
Right.
becomes a secondary crime scene. Your chances of survival or not getting physical once you get moved from your primary location are less than 1%. You come off of an elevator, someone says get back on the elevator. It's time to fight. Don't get moved from that primary location, get pushed back into another location. And the way I say that's two crime scenes is that if you come off that elevator and you're told to go back in the elevator, and let's say you were to die at that point or get seriously injured, when they come out to investigate, one crime scene is going to be outside the elevator. The next crime scene is going to be inside the elevator. So never get moved from your primary location. Never allow someone to tie up your hands, bound you in some way, shape, or form. If any of those things happen, it's time to fight. So someone tells you to move, someone says, I'm going to tie you up, someone tries to make you stop talking or tries to bound your mouth or tie up your hands or tie up your feet, it's go time, it's fight time. Anything you possibly could do to defend that person off.
And what's complicated about that is that it's asking you to initiate the violence.
Right.
And I remember, again, the classes that I took with these people where you have to have it be in a state of mental readiness to do that, because otherwise you genuinely could end up dead. But it's not like you're defending yourself in the usual way we think about that. They're saying, get in the elevator, and you're punching them in the throat or whatever.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. And that's part of having to have that conversation with yourself ahead of time, which we talk about a lot,
Right.
is having that that talk to say, okay, if someone was to try to abduct me, if someone was to try to push me into a situation where I've got to fight them off, am I willing to take someone's life? And not just saying, yeah, I will. You actually have to have an experience inside of your mind where you say, I will pick up a brick and I will slam it into their head several times to break their cranium to make sure that they're not going to hurt me anymore or hurt my family members. I am willing to pull out my firearm and shoot them and penetrate their body with bullets to incapacitate them so they can no longer hurt me. I am willing to step on the accelerator of my car and run somebody over to make sure that they're not going to be able to get inside my vehicle and hurt me or my family members. And you have to actually have that visualization and that thought process in your mind. And if you do it ahead of time, when the situation comes, not saying it's going to be easy, but you've already had that conversation with yourself, you've already had that thought process, and you kind of prepared yourself that I'm willing to go here now. Let's do it. Because you're not going to have time to think that through in the moment. It's not going to be get back on the elevator. Oh, hold on here. I'm supposed to fight now. Am I ready to do this? What should I do? You don't want to second guess yourself. You already have to have that conversation and that belief system in your mind that you're ready to go and let's do this.
It's got to be a reflex.
It absolutely does. And you also have to be 110% committed. Once it's go time, it's not like, oh, I'm going to hit him once, I hope it works. It's going to be full out fury until the threat is neutralized. And that's part of that conversation as well, that you're willing to go to the nth degree to finish off and neutralize that threat so that you can go home to your family. So let's talk a little bit, Doc, if you don't mind. And I have a couple questions that came through, but I want to dig into this a little bit. Why are you hitting them when they tell you to get back on the elevator? And the answer to that is, why would they be telling you to get out of sight, get out of voice area of being able to scream? What is their purpose of moving you from that primary location? It's because they want to have full control over you. They want to make sure that you can't alert anyone else to the situation that's going on, right? So knowing those two things, if you were to fight for your life at that point, and the law enforcement arrived and they say, all right, ma'am, why did you kick him in the groin 5 times, rip out his eyeballs, and here he is laying on the ground with a broken arm?
Right.
Because he approached me with aggression. He was angry, told me to get back inside the vehicle, told me to get inside the elevator. What am I supposed to do? Wait to see what's going to happen? I know he was up to no good, right? So
or you could say, Jamie told me it was all right.
I've had those conversations before with people, and I've had the calls, believe me, where people have done and protected themselves and actually called me to say, oh my God, it worked. But also to say, I'm glad I didn't hesitate. I'm glad I learned what to do in that situation. And I'm here to talk about it because your training helped. So understanding how bad the situation is and why you're doing it is very important, because why would any reasonable person or gentleman walk up to a female and say, get back in the elevator, get back inside the car? There isn't a reason. So it's time to fight. It's time to defend yourself. And one more thing to add to that is that it could be a female that tells you get back in the car and gets in the elevator too, right? A 90-pound female can stab you just as easily as a 250-pound male. So keep that in mind as well. They're both threats. It's how you perceive it and what is the tells that they're giving you that you're going to need to defend yourself in this situation, right, guys?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a question. So the question is, should you validate their feelings? And we're going back to 5 minutes ago, Doc. Should you validate the person's feelings even if you disagree with their grievance?
You could, it's certainly worth trying.
It is worth trying.
Something you should avoid to validate. If someone has said, suppose the person's paranoid and says, you know, that guy has been stalking me, and the reason I pulled out a knife was because I knew he was going to get me before I got him unless I did something. And, you know, you can say, look, before you do something, I can understand you're being concerned this guy who's going to get you. And I could understand how you get angry because you need to defend yourself. But how certain can you be? So you do validate that you understand that they're afraid. And again, based on their response, you'll know whether they're going to go with you or they're just going to keep blocking you and living in their own world, in which case it's not working. But it's definitely worth a shot.
Yeah. Great. You know, and that brings up another point. Let's talk about the person that isn't so violent, that walks up to someone getting out of the vehicle and says, "Hey, get back in the car." And the response is, "Why am I getting back in the car?" "Oh, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk to you a little bit," right? And trying to disqualify the way you're feeling. And a better example would be, let's say you're a single female and you're walking into your apartment building and you feel like you're being followed, and you walk into your apartment building and here approaches this strange man that's standing in front of you, and he's like, "Hey, do you need help with your bags? You know, go into your apartment. I'll help you. I live upstairs." And maybe you've never seen him before, or maybe you've already seen him in the apartment building, and you're like, "No, thank you. I don't need any help." And his reply would be, "Oh, come on. What's wrong? You think I'm going to hurt you? I'm not that guy. I'm a nice guy. I want to help you carry your bags." So they're trying to disqualify the way you're feeling, right? And they try to invalidate the way you're feeling. And it's sad to say that some of those people that start to invalidate the feelings make you drop your guard. And then you drop your guard and you're like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't feel this way. The guy lives in the building. How bad can he be? Oh, he looks like a nice guy," right? How many times have you heard that? And then you start dropping your guard, and then you put yourself in a dangerous situation. So if you look at statistically, people that have been part of violent crimes, of being sexually assaulted, robbed at gunpoint, and armed robbery and so forth, a lot of them afterwards will say, "I had a feeling. I knew I probably shouldn't have done that. Something was telling me there was something wrong about this guy. I don't know why I allowed myself to be put into that situation." And it wasn't something where it happened, bam, they were attacked. It was, "Get inside the vehicle. Let me buy you a drink at the bar. Let me take the elevator with you. Let me help you carry your bags out from the store." And just that first interaction with that individual, something didn't feel right. But that individual started disqualifying things and started making you feel like you were nuts and thinking the wrong way and thinking wrong, and put yourself into that vulnerable situation. And then now you were assaulted, or you allowed that crime to happen, right?
Now we're in the realm. I don't know if you have gone into this in your classes with this particular group, but we're in the realm, we're moving into predatory violence.
Right.
Where it's planful, where it's not done on impulse or because you have some sort of brain disorder or because someone's challenging you or you're high on drugs or whatnot, but this is a plan. And the saying, "You have nothing to be afraid of me," is part of a manipulation to get you to do something.
Right.
And that's a different ballpark, and you almost have to use a different set of instincts in that.
Yep. And that might be a different seminar.
Yeah, right.
A totally different topic, but I will leave you with this. A book that I highly recommend to all my clients is The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. And it talks about what we're talking about a little bit here, and it digs a little bit more into it. Go to Amazon, put it on your Amazon shopping list. Gavin de Becker, The Gift of Fear. And if you have questions, you forget it, you'll have access to the class replay or the seminar replay afterwards. You can always message us and we'll get you that information.
It's one of those rare books that's both very useful and a good read.
Absolutely, yes. There are certain books that you force yourself to read because you're getting some type of information, but that book actually is as you're reading it, you're enjoying what you're reading and getting so much knowledge and information out of it that it makes it a joy to get through the whole thing. So another question that I wanted to ask you, Doc, is when someone has an adrenaline dump and they're going to become violent with you, the telegraphs we start to look for are dilation of the eyes, twitching of the face, right? Clenching of the hands, flicking of the fingers, movement of the knees, clenching of the teeth, right?
Right. It's like They look like they're about to explode. Yes.
Can those same signs be there, whether it's someone that's having a mental episode, or can it also be there and if there's substance involved, Doc?
See, the answer is yes. And I was actually once at an incident, this was in Bridgeport, Connecticut, where one of our patients had escaped, went to his parents' house, and he had one of these hatchets. And I went up there with two police officers. And this guy was mentally ill. He was about as psychotic as you could be. And the officers were trying to talk him down, and he came at them, and one of them shot him and killed him. But as far as I was concerned, there was no other option. It was a tragedy. This is a sick guy. But it was as though he's got an adrenaline dump. He's coming at you with a weapon. He looks out of control. It almost at that point doesn't matter. The behavior calls for a response.
Right.
But
So
it feels terrible because then it shows up as, what did you kill this poor mentally ill person for? And there's a truth to that, except there was no real other choice except sacrifice yourself.
right. If I didn't take that shot, I may not be standing here today to tell the story.
It was terrible. Yeah.
Doc, I think it's safe to say that some people during that episode just can't be de-escalated.
That's right.
Now, or it's I'm in a bad situation. I have no other option but to shoot. So I think a lot of the times people cannot be de-escalated. We deal with the same person just about every week. It's the same thing. He deals with the police, he fights. You can talk to him, he's blue in the face. He is not going to de-escalate. As soon as he gets out of the car, he's going to fight with us. So I think it's safe to say some people just can't do it. You cannot de-escalate some people.
No, and that's definitely true.
Unfortunately,
You know what works with de-escalation, but you don't. But in these kinds of situations, we don't have that option because we used to do it at the hospital, and you guys can do it if enough people show up. But if you do a show of force, without being violent, but you just say, look, all these people around to keep you and everyone else safe, and if we have to, we'll hold you down. But if you've got enough force so the person doesn't think you can do something, or doesn't think that he can get past that amount of people, that can work sometimes. But we're talking about like individual encounters, and it's very hard to convince someone that they shouldn't do. So particularly if they're in an adrenaline dump, because they've got the adrenaline dump, you've got the adrenaline dump.
Right.
So it's two only partially rational people trying to negotiate with each other. It's very difficult.
right.
So what
It's
you're
a horrible-
It is a horrible situation, and maybe what we need to do is have 15 passenger vans going around now on patrol. And every time you get to a scene, 15 of you get out and surround the vehicle.
That's what's called labor intensive, but yes, right.
Now, that same situation, though, could escalate to certain people that even there are 15, 20 around, that could be a trigger, couldn't it?
See, yeah, and that's a very good point. And that's a point about every single thing we've talked about tonight. And that is, we're making guesses in terms of responding based on probabilities, not absolute certainties. And that's inherent in being alive. You can't do it, the point often gets made on one side or the other, at these situations, don't hesitate, do something. Well, a certain amount of hesitation can sometimes introduce some rationality. It can also get you killed.
Right.
I mean, and you just have to take your best guess and take the consequences and understand that you can't be right all the time.
Yep, absolutely.
And you can deal with multiple people that have the similar, what seems to be a similar crisis situation, and the right answer isn't going to be the same, even if that
Exactly.
even the same person over and over, like what
Right.
Scott was talking about.
Exactly. It's really frustrating, isn't it, that people are different?
Yeah.
You're human, right?
Yeah.
Well, and
We're-
the reality is we cannot truly understand or put ourselves in a position of a person in crisis from their point of view. If you haven't been in crisis or you don't have a real knowledge and training like Dr. Marcus, it's not easy to navigate through it, even for a professional. Correct, Doc?
Yeah, that's not only true, but you know, with whatever training I have and whatnot, I'm telling you, even with me, it only works a percentage of the time. It can't, because the situations are too unpredictable and too volatile, and people are too different, and it's mostly one stranger with another stranger. That's the value of what Scott was talking about. If you know this guy's track record,
Mhm.
you have some way of anticipating what's going to happen, and you might be able to intervene before it starts really escalating. But
Mhm.
when you have a situation where you don't know the other person, you're just making guesses.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, if you don't mind. I like to read off, and anyone has anything that they would like to ask, you could just raise your hand. We'll unmute your microphone or ask you to unmute, and you can ask any of us any direct questions. If you prefer not to make it a public question, you could just message me directly in the chat box and ask me a question, and I'll read it out loud for everyone here on the panel to hear, and we can answer the question that way. And we've only got a little under 10 minutes left. So if you have any questions, please raise that hand or type a message over to me. So the question is there a difference between a adolescent teenager or an adult when it comes to de-escalation and their mental state?
It's a good question. A number of my colleagues consider adolescence to be an altered mental state bordering on psychosis. So in that sense, it under certain circumstances, it's not going to be any easier. On the other hand, most, and I want to emphasize most because it's not everyone, but most adolescents are not yet hardened criminals.
Mm.
You can be, but there's more of a chance that you could reach an adolescent. Again, if you don't fall into the trap of there are various kinds of provoking you and, trying to see what you're going to do. And it's good to have any of you have brought up adolescents.
Mm.
What I'm saying is redundant, but it's because they can be obstinate, they can be enraged, but there's usually a piece of them you can talk to. With adults, again, there's such a broad spectrum that you just have to sense it and see whether you can connect or not. But
What is considered an adolescent? What's the age range in your field? Where do you consider adolescent?
I consider myself in late adolescence. Let's see.
Is it 18?
It's
Is it
usually
23, 27?
Adolescence is considered like even 14, early adolescent, 13 or 14. And actually it can go down to, some people consider it the equivalent of the biologic onset of puberty, which in girls more than boys has been decreasing, even to age 11 or 10 or whatnot. But it leads to mood swings, extreme views and obstinacy, and I'm making it sound negative. They're also delightful in certain ways. I mean, it's variable, but an adolescent who loses a temper is hard to deal with. Also, a parent who loses his temper at an adolescent who loses his temper is also hard to deal with. So you have to take all of this with a kind of smile. I don't know how to put it, but it helps keep you calmer when you sort of know that this is human beings interacting together, and there might be a way out. But a problem with adolescence is the gangs,
Right.
because when people who are adolescents get grouped together, they do things that they wouldn't do individually, and that's a different kind of problem.
And that's the peer-to-peer, right?
Yes.
Right.
Ramping it up. Another interesting question that came through is for someone that's having a mental episode, is that a learned behavior? And when I don't know, I'm not digging into that. I was going to say what I think they meant by that question, but do you have an idea, Doc?
I don't know how many of you know Vietnam veterans, and now also it's Gulf War veterans, but and Afghanistan veterans. But I knew it with the Vietnam veterans when they were having a flashback, and they'd get a gun and start shooting at people because they were literally having the experience of where they originally got their PTSD. They were repeating the trauma at home that actually began in the jungle. Now, would you want to say that that's learned? And PTSD has actually been called a disorder of memory, not a disorder of stress, interestingly. But if you think about it, they've overlearned. It's something they learned in the jungle. They've lost the ability to distinguish when they were in the jungle and when not. But the learned behavior, which is to fight, is continuous. So I guess in that sense, it's learned, but it's not learned in the way we ordinarily think of learning.
More triggered.
Yeah, triggered, right.
Okay,
But
got it.
it's the same behavior. So it's, if insofar as it's replicated, it's a kind of learning.
Got it. Do you have any, another question, Doc, do you have any recommendations for any good books to read on the topic that we discussed a little bit today? And we kind of went from de-escalation into substance, mental, episodes and so forth. But is there a book maybe you read or that you could recommend to everyone that would kind of cover a little bit of our topic for today?
Well, they're the ones the Gavin, the Becker book, but the ones that are biologic, where there's good, I'd have to think about this and I could get it to you.
All right, and
Yeah,
I
we
can
could
message
have
everybody.
Yeah, we could have a Dr. Marcus reading list. That'd be good.
Yeah.
There's a big literature on sexual offending, rape, kidnapping, sadomasochism, and how to deal with that, but also understanding trying to understand what's going on to the mind of people. There was a set of interviews that I saw when we were in training that had interviews with 5 different kinds of rapists. And there was such a difference, and it just changes your view of what actually is happening. I mean, from all the way from violent rapes to someone who was retarded, who was in a store and made a sexual advance towards someone thinking that she wanted it. But he didn't have the mental capacity to evaluate it. And when you put that in the same category as really a violent rape, it doesn't all fit together, and you don't think about it the same way, and you don't act in response to it in the same way. So, but that's a whole, it's a different kind of situation, but it's related. I'm trying to, I'll see what I can come up with.
Great. And if you could send it over to me, I could just message everybody afterwards in
Right.
an email blast and get you that literature that Dr. Marcus might recommend. Anybody else have any questions for us before we finish off today? You do? Okay, hold on one second, Denise. Let me, I'm going to ask you to unmute and then you can come online here. There you go.
It wasn't so much a question. It's just that that last topic would make an incredible seminar in itself.
Yes.
I think a lot of women would be interested in that.
I mean,
Yep.
sexual violence.
Yeah, you know, confrontations in public, particularly, even situations at home or in school or, you know, anywhere. I think a lot of ladies would be interested in knowing how they should deal with that sort of thing.
Jamie, didn't you do seminars like that, right? Or
Yes.
what?
But usually it's the in-person women's, women's self-protection and situational awareness seminars. But since we're not able to really get in person, maybe that's something we
Right.
should bring online for a format.
There may be a good way of doing that. It's nasty stuff, but it's illuminating, and in that sense, it might be helpful.
Okay. All right. We'll add that to our list, Denise.
Right.
I like the recommendation.
Yeah, it's a good idea. It really is.
Does anybody else have any questions for us? You raise your hand, give a little wave to the screen, and we'll ask you to unmute. And if you prefer to be private, again, you could type in the chat box. We're going to be signing off here in about a minute. We're going to have this video recording available to anyone. So if you jumped in late, or a few of you had to jump off early, we're going to make this available. We'll send you an email link so that you can watch the whole segment again. Or if you just want to review a part of it, you can do that as well. And if at any time you have any questions for us, feel free to go to the website, start a chat with us, fill out a contact us form. If you have a question directly for Dr. Marcus, you send us the message. We'll make sure to get it over to him and get you the proper answers.
By the way, these guys never learn. I always said I wanted to be called Ken. They can't get out of the habit of saying Dr. something. I wish they would do it, but so maybe all of you can, and that would help them do it, because it's the
Never.
formal name here.
You are absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Dr. Marcus.
Right.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We appreciate you coming in online, and we hope to see you for our next seminar. We're planning something out for the next couple of weeks, and you'll get updates through our email blast and on our website and social media channels. But thanks for taking the time out to join us tonight. On behalf of myself, Dr. Marcus, Scott Allard, and Michael Kahn, appreciate you guys joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.